Ready? Right. Good afternoon. Press conference. We literally just finished this week's weekly cabinet meeting a few short seconds ago. Of course, having a very packed schedule, including until the late hours of last night. And I heard one of the members of the media asking, well, why are you alone today? It is because the members are now dispersed into their respective places across the country because there are things afoot called an election. I have 4 matters that I'd like to discuss with you all today, and then, of course, take a few questions at the end. The first is the issue of tariffs that have been imposed globally by the United States President, as is their sovereign right. We have seen within the last 24 hours what appears to be the imposition by the United States government via an executive order of staggered tariffs to different countries across the world. And it covers many, many countries. In fact, it was just late last night, early this morning, I was looking and I was seeing certain islands in the Pacific that I personally had never heard about and that don't even have an economy, got the lowest baseline tariff, which is the same thing that Trinidad and Tobago got, which is 10%. It is every country's sovereign right to impose tariffs. We are currently in the process. I was immediately in contact with the Minister of Trade. In fact, when Jewel was asking me about it yesterday afternoon when I had just left speaking engagement, I didn't respond because I wasn't sure what you were referring to. But shortly thereafter, I became aware. I've been in constant contact with the Minister of Trade, the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, and in fact, this morning asked that the Minister of Trade meet with the United States government personnel in Trinidad at the U.S. Embassy to gather more information and facts. If you look at the news across the world, I have been seeing other world leaders in a similar position to myself. I saw the Prime Minister of Australia responding that this has been imposed. I think for Trinidad and Tobago, fortunately, it is at the lowest baseline, 10%. I saw our neighbors, Guyana, got an imposition of 38%, and there are various staggering rates across the world. We are all now in the process of studying exactly what this means. What I can tell the population is that from an initial information perspective, it is not a blanket, it does not appear to be a blanket tariff of 10% on all goods exported from Trinidad and Tobago into the United States. There are, it appears, certain exceptions. So we're currently studying that. Right now at 2 p.m., the Minister of Trade and Industry will be meeting with the United States personnel at the U.S. Embassy to start gathering more information so we can see how this may impact us. From a logical point of view, the wide-ranging imposition, meaning many, many countries across the world, some with higher rates than others, it does not appear on the initial face of it that it makes things less competitive. Because if everybody's starting off at a baseline, it means everybody increases. But it is premature for me to say anything at this stage as to the specifics of Trinidad and Tobago, because there are exceptions and we're still gathering information. And of course, there is an opportunity for conversation with the United States. You all would have seen just last week we were able to engage with the Secretary of State where I raised certain matters related to our energy industry. And I also spoke to Secretary of State Rubio about the tariffs that we were then aware of, the potential of tariffs, for example, in the shipping industry with respect to any Chinese vessels or any Chinese vessels in a fleet or orders for Chinese, and to have that opportunity to explain firsthand to the decision makers in the United States government how it may negatively affect not only Trinidad and Tobago, but the CARICOM region. We have a CARICOM heads meeting on the 11th of April, a virtual meeting, and I am certain if we don't have a meeting before then, that scheduled meeting, this whole topic of conversation will come up. And of course, CARICOM speaking as a bloc and as a united bloc has a much stronger voice. But we will remain engaged. We're currently gathering the information, assessing how it may affect Trinidad and Tobago's exports into the United States. We have a Caribbean Basin Initiative that the Minister of Trade and her staff are looking at, and that's one of the things they'll raise with the United States today. How is this affected, if it is affected? And so like the rest, many countries across the world, we are now gathering the information and then doing an assessment. As soon as that is done, with a level of accountability and transparency, we will come and talk to the population about how we believe this is going to affect us and what are some of the measures that we may be able to take. The second matter I'd like to raise today is in the energy sector. I was very pleased to have been informed yesterday, and I saw it come out in the mainstream media today, some good news announced from BPTT, and that is the first gas production in SIP. Why I'm using the opportunity to speak to the population about this today is because, unfortunately, those who like to mislead us, the population of Trinidad and Tobago, keep singing this song that all of our eggs are in cross-border gas. What you're seeing today, the first production of the SIP project, it is a gas project that we negotiated with BPTT, and I was being reminded this morning by BP, this particular project, SIP, was actually sanctioned by the then head of BP in London in a meeting with Prime Minister Rowley and myself in the autumn of 2022 as a result of the negotiations and discussions we were having in the boardroom of BP in London. The then CEO, Bernard Looney, told the then Prime Minister Rowley that based on how our discussions had gone, the relationship, etc., BP was going to sanction SIP. And what you've seen is a record turnaround from that autumn 2022, less than 3 years later, first gas being produced here in Trinidad, and it is a significant amount of gas from within our domestic waters. At the highest level, it'll reach about 250 million scuffs of gas a day, which is significant. So I'm asking the population, take note of the facts. This comes on the heels of what you've just seen only a week ago, another announcement by BP with respect to Ginger and Frangipani, which are two projects as well that they're currently conducting here in Trinidad and Tobago. This is the third subsea project after Juniper and Matapal with BP. And it will be followed very shortly. You should hear an announcement from BP and EOG on gas production from Mento. All projects here in Trinidad. Yesterday afternoon, I met with the president of the integrated gas at Shell globally, Mr. Cedric Kremers. He came here and we discussed, as one of the many matters that we were discussing, the Manatee project. The Manatee project is proceeding full speed ahead. We expect that first gas by 2027. Part of the platform is being fabricated right here in Trinidad, in La Brea at Tofco, the largest fabrication that has ever taken place here. The other part in Mexico, all that is needed to be done has been done, and we expect that first gas production. And he came with some very exciting news, along with Mr. Adam Lomas, with respect to Manatee and what are the possibilities. So I'm hoping that those discussions will lead to what it is they're saying can happen, because it will only mean more gas production than we had initially predicted from the Manatee project, which I remind you is the largest hydrocarbon project in Trinidad and Tobago for decades. And it was not a simple one, because it is literally deunitizing a field that we share with Venezuela, 27% on our side, the other 63%. 27 and the other 70-odd% in Venezuelan waters. And we negotiated with the government of Venezuela to allow us to produce our side Manatee, which is going to increase our production from 2027 and keep it stable. We also discussed Dragon. I gave them a report and we discussed about my conversations with Secretary of State Rubio. And I'm happy to say that NGC and Shell are continuing full speed ahead with our plans, understanding that we live in a world of uncertainty, but all is progressing, and we can, if everything goes according to plan, that will also assist us significantly with our production. The third matter I'd like to discuss with you this afternoon is you would have heard Prime Minister Rowley when one of the last things that he did, which was the opening of the Tobago terminal, the completion of construction of the Tobago airport terminal a few weeks ago, talk about a conversation that he had with the chairman of the Sandals Group, Mr. Adam Stewart. I'm happy to tell the population, as I've just been able to tell Chief Secretary Farley, that Mr. Stewart has agreed to come and meet with myself, the Chief Secretary Farley, and other stakeholders in Tobago on Monday the 7th. So people of Tobago in particular, this is a fabulous opportunity. We need to learn from the mistakes of the past and not allow a few misguided naysayers stop the potential development of the economy of Tobago. This is for Tobago. We have just completed a brand new terminal, international terminal, state-of-the-art terminal in Tobago, all as part of this government's plans, along with the people of Tobago. Importantly, how do we build that economy in Tobago? So I'm looking forward to that meeting. We will have all of the stakeholders there for this preliminary meeting, because remember, we had negotiated with Mr. Stewart and his then father, Butch Stewart, for not only a sandals, but also a beaches in Tobago and a new Greg Norman designed golf course. And unfortunately, we allowed that opportunity to slip away from us. It is noteworthy that in today's newspaper, one of these voices who actually doesn't contribute very much at all immediately comes out and tries to put a spoke in that wheel. But Trinidad and Tobago in particular, this is a decision for us, the people. This is a decision that is going to uplift the economy of Tobago in significant ways. Look at what happened in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a project that started after where we should have been. And immediately it has led to increased airlift. It has led to all sorts of positive growth of the GDP of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So I am happy because once again, what you've seen is a government stay engaged with Mr. Adam Stewart. I have stayed engaged with him over the years, communicating with him, offering support where we can offer support. Prime Minister Rowley did the same. So once again, we have that opportunity to engage in conversation with him on Monday in Tobago next week. The last matter that I'd like to raise with you all this morning is a matter that has been of concern to this government for quite a while. To me, as the Minister of Energy Industries, to the government when it was being led by Dr. Rowley, and now to me wearing the hats that I wear, that is a matter of Paria and LMCS and the tragic death of some employees of LMCS, and there's one survivor, Mr. Boodram. You would recall that Prime Minister Rowley, right here at Whitehall, had met with the families some months ago. I was there in the meeting as the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, Minister of Energy. We had the then Attorney General, Reginald Armour, with us as well, engaging with the families of the survivors, of those who lost their lives tragically in that incident, as well as the survivor, Mr. Boodram. Immediately coming out of that meeting, the government had engaged with Paria and asked that LMCS be engaged as well to see how the matter could be settled with the families. I have remained engaged in that conversation, constantly speaking to the members of Paria, meaning at the board level, and in particular the chairman level, understanding how difficult it is for the families and asking that they find ways to settle. But you see, fortunately, I'm an attorney and I understand the law and I understood the difficulties, and I was kept pushing them in ways that I thought could manage solutions. It has been a very frustrating process, I am certain, for the families, and it kept driving me to have the conversations. This needs to be settled. the insurers for both LMCS as well as Paria, I am told, because I've been following up on this more than once weekly for the past few months, are the ones who are quarreling and arguing about liability, who is at fault. Because in a situation like this, there is not yet a definitive determination of who and which company was at fault. So in law, you call that joint tort feasors. There's more than one who may be at fault. So I've been arguing with the lawyers, myself personally, saying, well, in a situation like that, let us go ahead and settle the matter with the families, because they're the ones who this continues to be painful for. And afterwards, the companies can fight. Let the insurance companies fight for determination of liability. I've had enough, and as Prime Minister last week, I'd been keeping the cabinet engaged on the conversation, keeping them abreast of the frustrating conversations I was having, because the government had always wanted that these matters be settled. The cabinet has today confirmed what I asked them last week, collectively and unanimously, that the government of Trinidad and Tobago is going to make an ex gratia payment, which means without any admission of liability, but recognizing the difficulty and the trauma and the tragic circumstances of these divers. And we're going to make ex gratia payments of $1 million to each of the families of the deceased divers and to Mr. Boudram in an ex gratia manner without any admission of liability. So at least the families would be able to get some measure. There is no compensation. There is no financial compensation that can compensate for the loss of life in those circumstances. You would recall we had a commission of inquiry. There was full participation by the government. We made sure that all of the facts were put there. There was a report. And the government has remained engaged. But ultimately, I can't force the insurers. I can't force the lawyers to do something that we all knew as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago we would have liked to have been done a long time ago, which is to assist the families financially. It will never be enough to compensate them for the pain and the tragic circumstances. So the cabinet has confirmed today that we, the government, will make those payments of $1 million to each of the families of the divers who lost their lives, as well as to Mr. Boudram, in an ex gratia manner with no admission as to liability. Those are the matters that I came to raise with you here this afternoon. I have a bit of time to take a few questions. Jules?
So you have companies that do export products to the U.S. from Trinidad and Tobago. The things that come to mind at first are, like, for example, those that do methanol exports and things of that nature. What is the immediate impact on those companies and the government being able to generate any sort of tax revenue from those companies via their exports to the U.S.?
The government being able to generate tax?
If it is that they are impacted, their exports are being impacted by the tariffs, does that affect also the government in terms of any taxes they pay to the state?
I saw a commentator suggesting that it would, because of course taxation theoretically is calculated on the profit being made. And if there's a tariff, that is then put into the cost of sales and therefore the cost that it costs to export. The truth is, Jules, as I said a short while ago, we need to work these things out, because the United States is not the only market that our methanol, as you use that example, or ammonia or LNG as just the energy products go to. So they will have to provide evidence that, okay, this is how much was shipped into the United States. So therefore so there is a lot to be worked out. But as well, I am being told in a preliminary manner, some of those products I've just listed may not be affected by the tariffs. So I think it's premature for me to make any declaration. At this stage, we're studying it immediately. We have our experts on it, and we're consulting with who we need to consult. So then we can come to the population and say, this is how we expect it to unfold. But this is something you've been seeing in the past few months. Earlier in the week, it was tariffs in the United States of cars not made in the United States being imported. You've had a Prime Minister of Canada, a newly appointed one, talk about the potential difficulties between their neighbor, the United States and Canada. So it is something that right now many countries in the world are dealing with, but we in Trinidad will continue to be responsible, analyze how it is, have the conversations that need to be had, and I can assure you as Prime Minister, continue to protect and to fight for Trinidad and Tobago.
Is this something, because I know you're supposed to meet with the banks again and the banking sector, the issue of the demand on foreign exchange, could this potentially add to that issue of the demand for foreign exchange in Trinidad and Tobago?
I am not sure what the answer to that is. I can't see that it immediately does unless there's a reduction in our income flow of foreign exchange as a result. But as I've just explained to you, there are many markets. The United States is one market in the whole global economy. Fortunately, our energy products find homes in many countries across the world, not only there. So let's take some time and see how it affects. But right now, I can't say what the negative or conversely, the positive effects can be. Because I can tell you, being solution-oriented, one of the things I would immediately start to look at is where are there other places that no product could be placed.
With respect to the payments being made to the families, it's almost inevitable. Some people are going to say that this is because an election is due this month, that you all are making this move. What's your response to that?
I can't change that perception of people, and I can understand the cynicism by persons who hold that point of view. I know that the facts relate that I was extremely frustrated personally because I'd been asking for this to be done even before we came into 2025. So as I said, I just had enough. So I went to Cabinet and said, I'm no longer prepared to have these companies and their insurers frustrate the process. Let us take a decision. I know the law. It is ex gratia. That can then go into calculations of whatever damages have to come out if they continue in court, etc. So I can't avoid that. I can't avoid the timing. I can't avoid the conversations that the population and people are entitled to have. Everybody's entitled to their own view. It is not for the election, but even me saying that will bring no solace and change nobody's mind on it. The point is, this is done. Definitively, a decision was taken with the full support of Cabinet, and that's how it's going to be.
You all have reached out to the families, sorry? You all have reached out to the families,
No,
and
we literally just came out of Cabinet a few seconds, so this is the first time that everybody would be hearing about it this afternoon.
The lawyer for the families is likely to be a UNC candidate.
Who's that?
Prakash.
Oh, is he?
Well, they've joined.
Well, we are
with
like the media and the rest of Trinidad and Tobago, knowing that tomorrow is nomination day, I can say that the party I am a part of and the chairman of, for weeks now, the population have known who our 41 candidates are. We've all gone through the run-through exercise with the EBC, and we all know that when we turn up there tomorrow, there should be no problems. Up to this point, I'm being told by you all who's going to be this candidate. You saying a candidate for the UNC. The name you call, last I saw, he was with the COP. I'm seeing people from PEP. I'm seeing, so call it whatever you want. I don't get involved in that.
So I imagine you all are going to have to contact him, for example, to tell the families what is the situation. Do you expect the political noise and the fact that it is coming, as Akash quite rightly said, in the middle of an election campaign, to complicate matters?
This is a decision by the government. This is not a decision by PARIA or by LMCS. The government is not engaged with any lawyers. The government will reach out to the citizens, that is the families who have suffered these tragic circumstances, say this is the decision of the government. To whom do we make the money payable? If they then involve their lawyers, so be it. The answer is yes. Do I expect this to become political? The answer is yes. Of course I do. But I know at the end of the day, and I'm satisfied that the government would have done what it can, albeit in my view, maybe a bit late, but not due to the circumstances, not for want of us trying.
Well, what stopped you all before? Did you have to fight anybody before now to get this done? Because it's 3 years and the population recognized that a wrong had been done. The Commission of Inquiry recognized that an injustice had been done. So why is it that all this time was allowed to pass while people were in distress? And, you're coming now to...
At the end of the day, there are companies involved. There's Paria involved, there's LMCS involved. Those are the two companies. They are the ones who had the responsibility to deal with the matter. What I'm now saying is the cabinet has decided, whilst you all are dealing with your legal wranglings, this is what we can do. And that is what has happened today.
Families have been informed first before you made this announcement?
No, I've literally just come out of the cabinet room and I thought I wanted to put this out there.
Should the families have been informed first?
That too is a speculative. That too is, should this have happened, should that have happened? This is how it has happened. There was no way leaving the cabinet to come directly to post-cabinet, which is what I did. They could have been informed.
It seems as if you were therefore making that decision to announce it in post-cabinet. Wouldn't the proper process be to contact the families first?
Akash, I don't know what is the proper process according in your mind and how you see it. I understand how you would like to see it. I understand how you may want to spin it. These are the facts. This is what has happened. Cabinet just took a decision. I came and have announced the decision. So no matter how you wriggle, you ask questions, you say, well, should this have happened, should not have happened, this is how it has happened prior.
How did you arrive at $1 million? Why $1 million and not 2 or 3?
The reasoning behind that is one of the things I extracted from the lawyers involved, meaning the lawyers who we could speak to and those advising the insurers through the board of Paria, is I asked a question. Is there the potential of an award of damages to anyone of less than $1 million? But also, we think there's justification because as you know, there is a government policy, for example, with law enforcement officers who are killed in the line of duty whilst on active duty, $1 million. So the cabinet thought, look, because there was conversation, should it be less? And ultimately I persuaded my colleagues without much resistance, let's go with the $1 million.
What is there to people who think, including the families who may have that position, that it is not enough?
And that is why I'm saying this is an ex gratia payment, which means ex gratia. I'm not going to get into the translation of Latin, hence maybe I get it wrong. And then this is for now. They will still go through their legal process. If they don't think it's enough, I am not stopping them, or the government is not stopping them from pursuing action against LMCS and Paria and whoever else they thinks. This is what the government could have done. This is what the cabinet could have done. And this is what we have done today. All right. Any other questions?
You see how it appears. This is an administration that has been asking people to tighten their belts. And then last evening you mentioned doubling food cards. Today you give out $1 million payments. You see how it looks, right?
Akash, you want to do a comparison here today? You want to do a comparison of where we could end up at 15-1? You want to do a comparison of a government that is being responsible, doing what it can in the circumstances, but sitting here and you trying to pry and question it as you're entitled to. I haven't heard you ask the same question about why do you have a government in waiting, people who want to form a government offering 10 and 14%, where you heard the facts last night, it will literally bankrupt the country. I haven't heard those questions posed by you. But this is what we have done. You can coin it, you could phrase it, you could swing it how you like. But we think this is a humanitarian thing to be done. As I've said very clearly, I wish it could have been done earlier, but I was really hoping that the companies, their lawyers, and the insurers would have taken the legal route and settled it. They haven't, so this is what is done. Any other questions?
Yes. A few weeks ago, President Trump would have announced a 25% tariff on countries that were doing any sort of business with Venezuela. That was the deadline for that to come into effect was yesterday. On top of what he announced yesterday, will this affect us?
I am not sure which tariff and executive order you're referring to. There was an executive order that I'd seen from President Trump specific to Venezuela and oil. Is that the one that you're referring to? Trinidad and Tobago.
So said any sort of oil and gas dealings. I could be wrong.
It does not say that. So it was specific to oil. Trinidad and Tobago has no trading with Venezuela in the realm of oil whatsoever. And that was before my meeting last week with Secretary of State Rubio, where I made the case for the dealings that we have, and in particular the Dragon deal. Ria?
Clarify something you said last night. You said that the pensions of public servants will be tax-free. And I want you to clarify what is the definition, because if I sort of go back to, what is defined as public officers and so on, does that include former members of parliament, former ministers, former prime ministers, and all those people who are in the higher public service covered by the Salary Review Commission? Are their pensions going to be taxed?
So I just had that conversation with the cabinet. It is not meant to cover parliamentarians and exactly the cohort that you've just announced. Former prime ministers, parliamentarians. It is not meant. It is the public servants, those who have come up through the ranks of the public service, who have been permanent in the public service, where there's a specific act that applies to them. But more details will be provided. So the answer to your question is no.
Prime Minister, there's another issue, if you don't mind.
Please.
You didn't address. There was a recent ruling by the Privy Council concerning the GLSC, the Chief Justice matter, and so on. As Prime Minister, if I'm not mistaken, under the Constitution, if you see it fit to advise the President whether a tribunal should be established or not, to look into the Chief Justice or actions and so on. What is your position on this particular issue at this time?
So, Jules, you're correct. The specific provision in the Constitution is Section 137. Fortunately, I have a lot of legal experience in the application of Section 137. I was part of the advisory team to then Prime Minister Manning when he had invoked Section 137. So I'm very familiar with it, very familiar with the law circulating it. What we saw coming out of the Privy Council is a decision dealing with the JLSE, an independent body, and their treatment of an officer who fell under the purview of the JLSE. At this stage, there is nothing before me as Prime Minister. And also I will say that whilst there may be some calling for action in those quarters, that is something, and I remember the legal advice very, very clearly, that you have to be very, very careful for. If anything arrives for the Prime Minister to take a look at, I certainly will not be advising myself. In those circumstances, it would be prudent, depending on what there is, to get the legal advice from those who are qualified in that area. But I have to say that right now, we are not, as a government, involved in that whatsoever. And I certainly, as the Prime Minister, am not involved in it.
Well, sir, with respect to what you mentioned last evening, this question is coming from
I mentioned a lot last
Anthony
evening.
Wilson. Let me explain, right? He is asking, why are we taking such a strong stand against flotation when TNT experienced a managed float in 1993, and two economists, Eric Bob and Wendell Motley, support a managed float?
Anthony Wilson wrote quite an interesting thesis in today's Business Guardian, which actually asked the right questions. I have a responsibility as somebody holding myself out to the population as to why PNM should remain in government, why I should remain as the Prime Minister, to say, look at this basket of what is being offered to you. How can it be afforded? And that is what I did last night. The only way that the basket of what the UNC is holding out to the population can be afforded is what we know as a devaluation. And it will lead to a 15-to-1 devaluation, as well as end up at the IMF. That is what I was educating the population on. And I note the silence so far from the other side, because I showed factually that that is their plan. Different policies a government takes. Let's look at Barbados, for example. Barbados has a policy decision that they're going to defend their dollar that they've done for decades, a 2-to-1, despite being in IMF programs. That's a Barbadian policy. This PNM government, for the last 10 years, and continue to have as our policy, we will defend the exchange rate, because we know if they get rid of and put it on a pure floating rate, that it will end up at 15-to-1, and that immediately means the importation of everything into Trinidad and Tobago is double the price, as I demonstrated with a few items last night. So our policy and our decision as a PNM is we will continue to defend the current rate of the 680, the 690. It is open. It is an option, as we saw the UNC's policy is, to completely get rid of the floating rate. That leads you to 15 to 1. That means everything that is imported immediately costs twice as much when your salary does not move in that direction. So it's not only inflation, it is loss of spending power, loss of purchasing power, etc. So as the easy answer is, to Mr. Wilson through you, that's our policy and we'll continue to fight and defend it.
It means,
Yes, Brian.
It means also, if you devalue the dollar, that exports would be cheaper, and in that sense we could earn foreign exchange.
Brian,
That theory, I'm asking, what about that theory in practice?
Did you hear what I just said? If you are an exporter, you may earn more for your products, but you as a person who's earning a salary in Trinidad and Tobago, your salary doesn't go up when the exporter makes more money. So your cost of living goes up, the inflation goes up. If you're earning $3,000 a month that could buy $3,000 worth of goods today, at 15 to 1, you go into the supermarket tomorrow, and that $3,000 is now only really worth, in real value, $1,500. And that is what I, as Prime Minister, will continue to defend the population of Trinidad and Tobago. I am not prepared to make a decision with the government to devalue to 15 to 1.
In terms of the monies to be paid to the divers, is there any deadline date? How soon is it going to be paid? And just secondly, for me, Dr. Rowley would have called out two persons in particular when he was in Tobago with regards to the Sandals project. Would they be invited to the meeting on Monday?
I spoke to Chief Secretary Farley and invited him to the meeting on Monday. I tried to get Mr. Watson Duke before coming here. I wasn't able to get him, but the answer is yes, he will be invited. With respect to the payment of money, that will now need to be conducted by the Ministry of Finance and make sure that they cover what needs to be covered. So I can't give an exact date. I would like it paid as soon as possible. Okay, I'd like to thank you all very much for your time this afternoon. And until next time, take care.
Stories that connect, voices that inspire. The all-female newscast on TTT. TTT News, first at 6 p.m.
TTT News, online and fully interactive. Follow us on social media at TTT Live Online.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. We end today's show with part 2 of my recent interview with the reporter Chris McGreal, who was the Johannesburg correspondent for The Guardian during the last years of apartheid through 2002. He's been closely following the South African-born billionaire Elon Musk, who was born in 1971 in Johannesburg, South Africa, and raised under the country's racist apartheid laws. Some of McGreal's pieces include